Right now, somewhere, there's a baby lying in a crib staring at the ceiling. And if you ask the parents what's going on inside that tiny head, they'd probably say something like nothing, or maybe just hunger and sleep. But what if that's wrong? What if behind those unfocused eyes there's something looking back? What if that baby knows, on some level, that it exists? Or, and this is the question that should actually unsettle you, what if it doesn't? What if every single one of us spent the first months, maybe years, of our lives as a body without a self inside it? Something was happening. But was anyone home? In 1970, a psychologist named Gordon Gallup Jr. came up with what is still considered the gold standard test for self-awareness. It's called the mirror test. While the subject is unaware, you put a small mark on its body, a dot of rouge on the cheek or forehead, somewhere it can only see in a mirror, not by looking down. Then you put it in front of a mirror and watch what happens. Most very young children look at their reflection and react to it like it's another kid. They smile at it, reach toward it, sometimes try to play with it. They don't connect the mark on the face in the mirror to their own face. But somewhere between 18 and 24 months, almost universally, something flips. The baby looks in the mirror, sees the mark, and reaches up to touch their own face. Not the mirror, their face. They understand that the reflection is them. Before that point, babies fail the mirror test completely. Every single time. For the first year and a half of life, by Gallup's measure, a human being does not recognize itself as a distinct object in the world. The animals that pass the mirror test, chimpanzees, orangutans, dolphins, elephants, and one bird, the Eurasian magpie, all pass it faster and more reliably than a 1-year-old human. Which means, for a while, your dog may have had a more developed sense of that's me than you did. Here's where it gets complicated. A lot of researchers think the mirror test is measuring something much narrower than do you know you exist? It's measuring visual self-recognition specifically. And a baby's world for the first year isn't built primarily on vision the way an adult's is. It's built on touch, on the feeling of a hand moving because they willed it to move, on the sound of their own cry, on the warmth of being held. In 1991, developmental psychologist Philippe Rochet began running experiments that didn't rely on mirrors at all. He'd let babies watch a live video feed of their own legs kicking, sometimes shown normally, sometimes shown reversed or delayed. Even very young infants, well before the mirror test passes, would kick more, and differently, when the feed matched their movements in real time versus when it didn't. They could feel the difference between their body and a body. Something in there was already tracking "this is mine" long before it could say so, or recognize a face in a mirror. So maybe the format of the test is wrong, not the baby. Maybe self-awareness doesn't arrive all at once on a single day around 18 months. Maybe it's built in layers, and the mirror is just the layer we happen to be able to measure. There's a distinction developmental scientists draw that sounds almost too simple to matter until you sit with it. It's the difference between having a body and having a sense of having a body, between something happening to you and knowing that it's happening to you. A newborn clearly has experiences. Light hits its eyes, sound hits its ears. Hunger happens, comfort happens. Nobody seriously disputes that there's something going on in there. The question is whether there's a there for it to happen to. Whether, behind the eyes, anyone is keeping track of the fact that all these experiences belong to the same someone. Researchers call the earliest version of this a minimal self, sometimes ecological self. It's the most basic sense that your body is a single thing, located somewhere, that moves through a world separate from it. Some researchers believe newborns have flickers of this from day one. Babies just hours old will turn their heads to root toward a touch on the cheek, distinguishing self-touch from being touched by someone else, in a way that suggests some primitive boundary between me and not me already exists. But a minimal self isn't the same as a narrative self. The ongoing sense of being a particular person with a past and a future. The I that worries about tomorrow or remembers being embarrassed last week. That version doesn't show up for years. Most adults can't remember anything from before age 3 or 4, a phenomenon called childhood amnesia, and one theory is that it's not that the memories are lost, it's that there wasn't yet a stable I to file them under. All of this, the mirror test, the kicking experiments, the rooting reflex, it's all behavioral. We can watch what babies do. We cannot get inside what they feel. There's a concept philosophers call qualia, the raw subjective texture of experience. The specific way milk tastes, the particular discomfort of a wet diaper, the feeling of being you right now in this moment, whoever you currently is. Is there something it feels like to be a 3-month-old? Or is a 3-month-old just running biological software, processing inputs, producing outputs, with nobody yet home to feel any of it? The philosopher Thomas Nagel made an argument in 1974 that applies eerily well here, even though he was writing about bats. He said that no matter how thoroughly we study an unfamiliar nervous system from the outside, the inner experience of it stays inaccessible from the inside. A baby's brain is, in a sense, the most familiar unfamiliar nervous system there is. It's going to become you, or someone exactly like you, in a few years. And yet right now, you have absolutely no memory of what, if anything, it was like to be it. Here's what makes this stranger. A newborn's brain already has roughly the same number of neurons as an adult's. What it doesn't have is the wiring. The prefrontal cortex, the region most associated with self-reflection, planning, and the sense of I, is one of the slowest parts of the brain to develop, continuing to wire itself well into a person's 20s. Around the same age that babies start passing the mirror test, something else happens too. Language starts to take off, the word no becomes a favorite, and toddlers start showing self-conscious emotions for the first time. Embarrassment, shame, pride. These are emotions that require a concept of self being evaluated by others. You can't feel embarrassed unless there's a you that could look bad. The timing isn't a coincidence. Self-recognition, language, and self-conscious emotion all seem to cluster together around the same developmental window, like several pieces of the same machine clicking into place at once, which raises the possibility that the self isn't a switch that flips on. It's an assembly process. A baby at 6 months might have sensations, preferences, even something like moods, without yet having the integrating structure that bundles all of that into a single ongoing me. The lights might be on in scattered rooms long before there's a hallway connecting them. There's one more piece of evidence that's hard to explain away, and it's something every parent has lived through at 3 a.m. Infant crying in the first months of life often happens for no identifiable reason. Not hunger, not pain, not a wet diaper, nothing. Pediatricians have a name for the most extreme version of this, colic, and decades of research still haven't found a single clean cause. One reading of this is purely mechanical, an immature nervous system misfiring, releasing built-up tension with no meaning behind it. But another reading is more unsettling. What if some of that distress is the closest thing a preverbal brain has to existential discomfort? A system that is just beginning to register something is happening to something, without yet having the structure to locate, name, or soothe whatever that something is. Not fear of death, not anxiety about tomorrow, just the raw, unfiled sensation of being a thing that things happen to, with no framework yet for what a thing even means. No one can prove that. It might be nothing more than gas, but it's worth noticing that the period of life with the most unexplained distress is exactly the period before the self, by any measure we have, has finished assembling. So where does that leave us? The science says this. By around 18 months, a baby will recognize itself in a mirror, the same milestone that only a handful of animal species ever reach. Well before that, a baby's brain is already tracking the boundary between its own body and the world. Self-conscious emotions, Language and self-recognition all arrive in the same narrow window, as if multiple systems are converging on the same conclusion at once. But the innermost question, the one you actually want answered, is whether there was something it was like to be you, back before any of that had assembled. That one we can't reach. Not through experiments, and not through memory, because the very system that would have stored the answer wasn't built yet. Here's what's strange about that. Every person who has ever lived passed through this stage. Every philosopher who has ever written about consciousness, every scientist who has ever studied it, was once a body in a crib with, by the best evidence available, no one fully home yet. The thing doing the wondering right now used to not exist, inside the same skull, with no clear moment when it arrived. There's a video that gets shared sometimes of a baby seeing its reflection for the first time and freezing, staring, before slowly reaching up and touching its own face. Watching it, you can't help but wonder what that moment actually felt like from the inside. Whether there's a flicker, a click, something that could be described as someone arriving, or whether it just looks that way from the outside, and on the inside, there was never a moment at all, just a gradual thickening of fog into a person, with no one there to notice the transition happening. Maybe that's the most honest answer anyone can give. Somewhere in your first 2 years, you became you, and you will never ever remember it happening.